Admiral Zara Kveth stood before the holographic display, her crystalline form refracting the light of 1,000 distant stars. The Galactic Coalition's command center orbiting Nexus Prime had never felt more crowded, yet never more hollow. Representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations gathered around her, their diverse forms casting strange shadows across the tactical displays. "The swarm approaches," she announced, her voice resonating through the crystalline communications matrix. "Our latest estimates suggest they will reach the Orion Arm within 3 standard cycles. We need Earth." The assembly stirred uncomfortably. Humans were the newest members of the coalition, discovered barely 2 solar cycles ago. Their acceptance into the galactic community had been controversial, a species that still used chemical propulsion for their atmospheric vehicles, yet somehow had mastered gravitational manipulation for their starships. "The humans are primitive," General Zoth rumbled, his massive arthropod form clicking with agitation. "Their civilization has barely achieved unified planetary governance. How can they possibly help against the swarm?" Admiral Kveth's crystalline surface rippled with barely contained frustration. "You've all seen the reports. Their battle doctrine is unique. While we focused on energy weapons and shield technology, they developed weapons that ignore shields entirely. While we perfected faster-than-light travel, they somehow created weapons that affect space-time itself." The holographic display shifted, showing footage from the first contact incident. A small human vessel, barely the size of a coalition corvette, had accidentally wandered into a pirate ambush meant for a merchant fleet. Instead of retreating, the human ship had engaged. The footage still sent shivers through Kveth's crystalline matrix. The human vessel had moved in ways that denied physical laws, firing weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. The pirates' shields had meant nothing, their ships had simply ceased to exist, transformed into clouds of elementary particles by forces the Coalition's scientists still couldn't fully explain. "Their ambassador has already pledged their support," Kveth continued. "They understand the threat the swarm represents. Earth's entire defense fleet is being mobilized as we speak. And yet they're not here," General Zoth countered. "The coordination meeting was scheduled 2 standard hours ago. No communication, no explanation for their absence." Kveth couldn't argue with that. The humans had been enthusiastic about joining the defense effort, their military leaders eager to prove themselves to the galactic community. Their absence now was concerning. The tactical display suddenly flared with new alerts. The swarm's advanced fleet had been detected crossing the outer sensor perimeter. They were early. "We can't wait any longer," Kveth declared. "All forces to battle stations. We execute the defense plan with or without Earth's forces." As the command center erupted into activity, Kveth found herself wondering if they'd misplaced their trust in humanity. The defense plan had been crafted with human vessels in mind, counting on their reality-bending weapons to counter the swarm's overwhelming numbers. The Coalition fleet began moving into position, thousands of ships forming up in the elaborate 3-dimensional battle formation they'd spent months perfecting. The space around Nexus Prime sparkled with the energy signatures of charging weapons and shields. "Multiple swarm signatures detected," the sensor officer announced, their gelatinous form pulsing with anxiety. Numbers exceeding projections by at least 30%. Kveth felt her crystalline heart sink. Without Earth's forces, the battle plan had significant gaps. The swarm would notice, would exploit those weaknesses. Billions of lives across 17 civilizations were counting on this defense holding. "Where are you?" she whispered, her gaze drawn to the sector where Earth's fleet should have been forming up. The empty space seemed to mock her, a void in their defenses that could cost them everything. The first wave of swarm ships became visible to the naked eye, their biomechanical forms distorting the starlight behind them. Hundreds, then thousands of ships, each one a perfect fusion of organic and mechanical elements, all driven by a single consuming purpose: to absorb, to consume, to add more biomass to their ever-growing collective. "All ships, battle formations," Kveth commanded, her voice steady despite her fears. "May the void watch over us all." As the Coalition fleet engaged their stealth systems, preparing for the ambush that would hopefully buy them some advantage, Kveth couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The humans had seemed so confident, so eager to prove themselves. Their absence felt out of character for everything they'd learned about the species. The swarm drew closer, their formations tightening as they approached the apparent empty space around Nexus Prime. In moments, the largest battle in Coalition history would begin, and humanity's first real test as members of the galactic community would end in failure before it began. Or so everyone thought. The first shots of the battle illuminated the void like artificial stars. Coalition ships decloaked in perfect synchronization, their weapons finding marks across the swarm's forward elements. For a brief moment, it seemed the surprise attack might give them the advantage they desperately needed. That moment didn't last. The swarm ships, despite their organic appearance, reacted with machine-like precision. Their formation shifted, not breaking apart as expected but condensing, becoming denser. Ships merged together, smaller vessels combining into larger ones right before the Coalition sensors. By the ancient stars, General Zotha's voice crackled across the command channel. They're adapting faster than our simulations predicted. Admiral Kveth watched as the tactical display updated, showing the rapidly changing battlefield. The swarm's ability to combine and reconfigure their ships mid-battle was known, but never before had they demonstrated such speed and coordination. Focus fire on the merging clusters, she ordered. Don't let them complete their transformations. Coalition energy weapons lashed out, their beams cutting through space with deadly precision. Some found their marks, turning partially merged swarm ships into expanding clouds of debris and biological matter. But for every successful hit, 2 more combinations completed, creating larger, more formidable vessels. "Ma'am," the sensor officer called out, their gelatinous form rippling with alarm. "We're detecting quantum fluctuations from the merged swarm ships. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database." Before Kveth could respond, the first of the newly formed swarm dreadnoughts opened fire. The weapons weren't the standard biological projectiles or energy beams they'd encountered before. Instead, waves of quantum distortion spread across space, bypassing shields and armor alike. 3 Coalition cruisers simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in brilliant flashes that temporarily blinded nearby sensors. The swarm had somehow developed countermeasures to human weapons technology without ever having encountered it in battle. "Fall back to secondary positions," Kveth ordered, her crystalline form vibrating with tension. "All ships, initiate emergency protocols. They've stolen our advantage." The Coalition fleet began its fighting retreat, but the swarm pressed forward relentlessly. Their new composite ships moved with impossible grace for their size, their quantum weapons creating holes in the Coalition's formation with each volley. "Admiral," General Zotha's voice was tight with controlled panic. "We're losing containment on the eastern flank. The swarm's broken through our line." Kveth watched helplessly as the tactical display showed swarm ships pouring through the gap, the exact section where Earth's fleet should have been defending. The carefully planned crossfire zones were useless without human ships to complete the firing solutions. "Redirect the 7th and 9th flotillas," she commanded. "We need to seal that breach before." Her orders were cut short by a new alarm. The sensor grid was detecting massive energy buildups from multiple swarm vessels. The readings were off the scale, suggesting they were preparing to deploy something far more devastating than their quantum weapons. "All ships brace for impact." Kveth broadcast across all channels. "Unknown weapons signature detected." The space around the swarm dreadnoughts began to distort, reality itself seeming to bend and twist. The effect spread outward like ripples in a pond, but these ripples threatened to tear apart anything they touched at the quantum level. Coalition ships tried to evade, their engines straining against the growing gravitational distortions. Some succeeded, their hulls groaning under the stress. Others weren't so fortunate, their structures twisting and breaking apart as space itself turned against them. "How?" General Zoth demanded over the command channel. "How did they develop weapons that manipulate fundamental forces? This technology is beyond even what the humans demonstrated." Kfeth's tactical mind raced through the possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. The swarm wasn't just adapting to fight them, it was evolving, developing countermeasures to weapons it had never encountered. Almost as if they knew, she whispered, her crystalline form dulling with the realization. They knew about the humans' capabilities. This isn't adaptation, this is preparation. But how? The battle continued to deteriorate around them. Coalition ships fought bravely, but they were facing an enemy that had somehow prepared for every strategy, every weapon, even the ones they'd been counting on as their secret advantages. In the command center, Kfeth made a decision that went against everything her centuries of tactical experience told her was right. All forces, she broadcast, maintain engagement. Do not retreat. The humans. She paused, wondering if she was placing faith in a species that had already abandoned them. But something about this situation felt wrong. The swarm's preparedness, their specific countermeasures to human technology they'd never faced, the timing of it all. The humans will come, she finished, her voice carrying more certainty than she felt. They must. As if in response to her declaration, the swarm launched their largest assault yet. Waves of ships, now protected by quantum fields that mimicked human technology, advanced on all fronts. The coalition fleet's formation began to buckle under the onslaught. The battle for Nexus Prime was quickly becoming a massacre. And still, that sector of space where Earth's fleet should have been remained empty, silent, and dark. The command center's holographic display flickered with hundreds of damage reports as the coalition fleet struggled to maintain its defensive lines. Admiral Kfeth's crystalline form had developed hairline fractures from the stress of watching her carefully laid plans crumble before the swarm's overwhelming assault. 7th Flotilla has gone dark, an officer reported, their voice hollow with exhaustion. 9th Flotilla reporting critical damage to 60% of remaining vessels. The swarm's quantum weapons had torn through their best defenses like they were made of vapor. Each passing moment brought them closer to total defeat. The space around Nexus Prime had become a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams. Then something changed. Admiral! The sensor officer's gelatinous form pulsed with sudden excitement. I'm detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations at the edge of the battlefield. Kfeth's attention snapped to the indicated sector. The readings were subtle, so subtle that they might have been dismissed as battle damage to the sensor array. But there was a pattern to them, a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. Analysis, she demanded, her crystalline structure vibrating with renewed focus. The fluctuations are creating a cascading effect through subspace, the officer reported. It's similar to the wake of a ship using stealth technology, but on a scale we've never encountered before. General Zotha's massive form shifted uncomfortably. Could the swarm have developed yet another new weapon? No, Kfeth replied, her voice filled with growing understanding. The swarm doesn't create patterns like this. These fluctuations are too precise, too calculated. There. She paused as a new set of readings appeared on the display. The gravitational distortions were spreading, creating a complex web of intersecting waves throughout the battlefield. The swarm ships seemed oblivious to the change, pressing their attack with the same relentless efficiency. All coalition ships, Kfeth broadcast suddenly, adjust shield harmonics to frequency 793. Immediately. Her officers looked at her in confusion, but the order was relayed. Across the battlefield, coalition vessels modified their defensive systems to the specified frequency, a frequency that hadn't been part of any battle plan or briefing. The effect was instantaneous. The swarm's quantum weapons, which had been devastating their fleet, suddenly seemed to lose focus. Their beams still fired, but now they bent away from coalition ships, drawn to the mysterious gravitational distortions that had appeared. Impossible, General Zoth breathed. The frequency, it's creating a quantum resonance pattern that's interfering with their weapons. Kfeth's crystalline form glowed with fierce intensity. Not impossible. Inevitable. The humans didn't fail to show up for battle, they were already here. As if in response to her words, new signals began appearing on the tactical display. They started as ghost images, barely detectable even with their most sensitive equipment. But they were growing stronger, taking form in a way that defied conventional physics. The sensor officer's voice trembled with awe. "Admiral, I'm detecting ships. Hundreds of them. They're phasing into normal space, but not from hyperspace or any known dimension. It's as if they're emerging from the gravitational distortions themselves." Kveth watched as the tactical display updated, showing the true scope of what was unfolding. The human fleet hadn't just been hiding, they'd been operating on a level of reality that the Coalition's sensors couldn't even detect. The gravitational web they created wasn't a weapon or a defense system, it was a door. "All Coalition forces," she broadcast, her voice ringing with renewed hope, "maintain current positions and prepare for coordinated action. Our allies have arrived." The first human ship fully materialized in normal space, its hull seeming to condense out of the very fabric of reality. It was massive, easily dwarfing the largest Coalition dreadnought, but it moved with impossible grace. More followed, each emergence precisely timed and positioned. The swarm reacted immediately, their ships breaking off their attack on the Coalition fleet to face this new threat. Their quantum weapons lashed out, but the beams twisted and curved around the human vessels, caught in the complex gravitational fields they had woven throughout the battlefield. "By the void," Zoth whispered, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "They didn't just plan for this battle, they engineered the entire space around us. We weren't fighting alone. We were fighting inside a weapon they spent hours creating." Kveth's tactical display erupted with new data as the human fleet fully revealed itself. Their ships hadn't arrived late. They'd been methodically preparing the battlefield since before the swarm arrived, operating in dimensions beyond conventional spacetime. The humans had turned the entire sector into a trap. And now it was ready to close. The first transmission from the human fleet came not through conventional channels, but as a pattern of gravitational waves that the Coalition systems automatically translated into speech. "Coalition Command, this is Admiral Sarah Chin of the Earth Defense Force. Sorry for the delayed introduction. We needed time to weave the quantum net properly." Admiral Kveth's crystalline form resonated with relief and fascination. "Admiral Chin, your timing is unconventional." A soft chuckle came through the gravitational transmission. "Unconventional is what we do best. The swarm's been monitoring conventional space for months, waiting for our arrival. They never thought to look sideways through time." The tactical display showed the human fleet taking up positions throughout the battlefield, their ships moving in ways that seemed to ignore normal physics. They didn't so much fly through space as they rerouted around themselves, each movement precise and purposeful. "All Coalition vessels," Admiral Chin broadcast, "what you're seeing is Project Mobius. We've spent the last 12 hours, relative time, weaving a quantum gravitational matrix throughout this entire sector. Every shot the swarm has fired, every movement they've made, has only strengthened the web." General Zotha's mandibles clicked rapidly as he studied the tactical data. "The gravitational distortions, you've created a closed temporal loop? But the energy requirements would be astronomical." Chen's voice carried a hint of pride. "That's why we needed your fleet to keep them occupied. Each swarm weapon discharge has been feeding power back into our matrix. They've been charging our trap with every attack." Kveth watched in amazement as new data scrolled across her displays. The humans hadn't just created a weapon, they'd turned the fundamental forces of the universe into a battlefield where they held every advantage. "Coalition fleet," Chen continued, "prepare for temporal sync on my mark. Your shields have already been harmonized with our matrix. When we activate the final sequence, you'll experience a moment of displacement. Don't be alarmed." The swarm, seemingly sensing the change in battlefield dynamics, launched a massive coordinated attack. Their quantum weapons fired simultaneously, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon bearing down on both human and Coalition positions. But the energy never reached its targets. Instead, the beams curved and twisted, caught in the invisible web of gravitational forces that the humans had woven through space-time itself. The more power the swarm poured into their attack, the stronger the distortions became. "Now they've figured it out," Chin commented, almost casually. "Watch how they try to adapt." The swarm ships began to shift and merge again, but this time their transformations seemed sluggish, uncertain. The quantum fields they had copied from human technology were working against them, interfering with their ability to combine effectively. Did you really think we'd let our most advanced technology fall into enemy hands by accident? Chen's voice carried a sharp edge now. Those quantum weapons you copied? They're not just imperfect imitations, they're designed to fail at exactly this moment. Kvetha's tactical mind raced with the implications. The first contact incident, the leaked technology specifications. All part of the plan, Chen confirmed. Earth's apparent technological limitations, our seemingly primitive approach to certain sciences, it was all carefully crafted misinformation. We needed the swarm to think they had our measure. The human fleet began to move in perfect synchronization, their ships tracing complex patterns through the quantum web they had created. Each movement seemed to twist space itself, creating cascading effects that rippled through the battlefield. Temporal sync in 30 seconds, Chen announced. All coalition ships, prepare for Phase 2. The real battle is about to begin. Kveth watched as her tactical display transformed, showing layers of reality she hadn't even known existed. The human ships weren't just moving through space, they were moving through multiple dimensions simultaneously, each position carefully calculated to strengthen their trap. 10 seconds, Chen's voice rang through the command channel. Remember, when the sync hits, reality will flex. Your ship's systems have been temporarily modified to compensate. The swarm launched another desperate attack, their ships firing everything they had at the approaching human fleet. But it was too late. Their weapons, their stolen technology, their very presence had all become part of humanity's grand design. 3, 2, 1, sync initiated. The universe blinked. When Kvetha's sensors came back online, the battlefield had changed. The swarm fleet was still there, still numerous and deadly, but now they were surrounded on all sides, not just by coalition and human ships, but by the very fabric of space-time itself. Project Mobius wasn't just a weapon or a strategy. It was humanity's way of rewriting the rules of warfare itself. And they were just getting started. Reality stabilized after the temporal sync, but the battlefield had fundamentally changed. The swarm fleet now found itself caught in what Admiral Chen called a quantum coral, a space where the normal rules of physics had been selectively rewritten. All coalition vessels, Chen's voice resonated through the gravitational comms, execute attack pattern tesseract. Remember, in this space, conventional directions are suggestions. Kveth watched in amazement as the human ships began moving in ways that defied comprehension. They didn't just dive and roll, they seemed to fold through dimensions, appearing simultaneously at multiple points in space before converging on their targets with devastating precision. Coalition fleet, follow our target markers, Chen commanded. Your weapons will bend along the gravitational curves we've established. Trust the targeting solutions, no matter how impossible they seem. The coalition ships opened fire, their energy weapons following twisted paths through space-time. Beams that started firing in one direction curved impossibly, striking swarm vessels from angles that shouldn't have existed. The effectiveness was devastating. They're attempting to adapt, General Zoth reported, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Swarm vessels are trying to merge into larger forms again. Let them, Chen's response carried a note of satisfaction. Watch what happens. As the swarm ships began their combination process, the quantum coral activated. The space around the merging vessels twisted, creating temporal eddies that caught the partially combined ships in endless loops of transformation. Some swarm vessels found themselves stuck between states, neither fully merged nor separate. The coral isn't just restricting their movement, Chen explained. It's disrupting their ability to evolve and adapt. Every attempt to change makes their situation worse. Kvetha's tactical display showed the true scope of what was happening. The human fleet wasn't just fighting the swarm, they were conducting a symphony of gravitational forces, each ship's movement precisely calculated to strengthen the quantum coral while creating opportunities for devastating attacks. Coalition vessels, prepare for Phase 3, Chen announced. We're going to demonstrate why humanity never bothered developing energy weapons. Sometimes the old ways are best when properly enhanced. The human ships suddenly revealed weapon ports unlike anything Kveth had seen before. Instead of energy projectors or missile tubes, they looked more like ancient ballistic weapons, but scaled up to impossible sizes. Are those kinetic weapons? Zoth asked in disbelief. Railguns, Chen confirmed. But firing shells designed to interact with our quantum coral. Watch! The human fleet opened fire. Massive projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, but instead of traveling in straight lines, they followed the twisted paths of spacetime created by the quantum coral. Each shell left trails of gravitational distortion in its wake, further strengthening the trap. The effect on the swarm ships was catastrophic. Their stolen quantum shields, designed to counter energy weapons, proved useless against physical projectiles moving through twisted space. Ships that tried to evade found themselves turning into the path of projectiles approaching from impossible angles. Now you see why we let them think we were primitive. Chen's voice carried a grim satisfaction. While they were copying our advanced technology, they never considered that our real advantage lay in combining the simple with the impossible. Kveth ordered her fleet to coordinate with the human assault. Coalition energy weapons followed the paths carved by human railgun fire, creating a devastating web of destruction. The swarm's previously unstoppable advance had been transformed into a desperate fight for survival. They're attempting to retreat, Zoth reported, his voice tight with excitement. Swarm vessels are trying to break formation and escape the coral. That's not retreat, Chun corrected. They're attempting to scatter and regroup. Standard swarm tactics when faced with a superior force. But in this space, she didn't need to finish the sentence. As the swarm ships tried to flee, they found themselves moving through loops of twisted spacetime. Some emerged from their escape attempts minutes before they began them. Others found themselves flying straight back into the heart of the battle they were trying to flee. The coral remembers, Chin explained. Every movement they make, every adaptation they attempt, becomes part of the pattern. They're not just fighting us anymore, they're fighting the accumulated weight of their own actions through time. Kveth watched as the massive swarm fleet, which had seemed unstoppable mere hours ago, found itself systematically torn apart by weapons that violated physics and strategies that rewrote reality. Humanity hadn't just brought superior firepower to the battle, they had changed the nature of warfare itself. But even as victory seemed within reach, Kveth's tactical experience warned her that something was wrong. The swarm's movements were becoming more erratic, more desperate. And in her experience, a desperate enemy was often the most dangerous. Admiral Kveth's warning came too late. Admiral Chin, the swarm's energy signatures are becoming unstable. There, the space around the largest concentration of swarm ships suddenly warped, reality itself seeming to scream as the trapped vessels initiated their final gambit. They weren't trying to escape anymore. They were attempting to tear apart the quantum coral by overloading their stolen technology. All ships, emergency temporal anchor. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. They're trying to create a cascade failure in the matrix. The human fleet's movements changed instantly, their ships racing to contain the growing distortion. The quantum coral, which had been their greatest advantage, now threatened to become a liability. If the swarm succeeded in destabilizing it, the resulting reality collapse would destroy everything within several light-years. Coalition vessels, Chin broadcast, fall back to minimum safe distance. Your ships aren't equipped to handle temporal shear at this magnitude. But Kveth had seen something in her tactical display that the humans might have missed. Negative, Admiral Chin. The swarm's disruption is creating patterns we can use. Permission to coordinate a joint strike. There was a brief pause before Chen responded, her voice carrying both concern and curiosity. Show me. Kveth's crystalline form vibrated as she transmitted her analysis. The swarm's desperate attempt to destroy the quantum coral was following predictable mathematical sequences, the same kind of patterns that had allowed the humans to trap them in the first place. By the void, Chen breathed. You're right. The dissolution follows the same quantum laws we used to create the coral. Which means we can use their own destruction against them, Kveth finished. But we'll need perfect synchronization between your temporal weapons and our energy arrays. The timing would have to be exact, Chin warned. A millisecond's delay could collapse the entire sector. Then we'll be exact, Kveth declared. Coalition fleet, prepare for final engagement. Lock targeting systems to human temporal frequencies. The space around them continued to distort as the swarm pushed more power into their desperate gambit. Reality itself seemed to be fraying at the edges, creating visible tears in the fabric of space-time. Through these rifts, impossible colors and geometries could be glimpsed, the raw chaos that lurked between dimensions. Coalition fleet in position, Zoth reported, his normally steady voice tense with anticipation. Energy weapons charged and synchronized. Human fleet ready, Chun confirmed. On your mark, Admiral Kveth. Kveth's crystalline form pulsed with focused energy as she studied the tactical display. The patterns were becoming clearer now, the mathematical dance of destruction that the swarm had inadvertently created. They had one chance to get this right. All vessels, execute final protocol Omega on my mark, she commanded. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The combined fleet fired as one. Human temporal weapons and coalition energy beams struck the dissolving quantum coral at precisely calculated points. Instead of fighting the destruction, they enhanced it, but in controlled, directed ways that followed the patterns Kveth had identified. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The swarm's attempt to destroy the coral transformed into a precisely guided implosion. Their ships, caught in the collapse they had initiated, found themselves being compressed through multiple dimensions simultaneously. It's working, Chan exclaimed. The coral is containing the collapse, channeling it back through their fleet. Kveth watched as the swarm vessels were crushed by forces they had unleashed, their forms twisted and compressed until they vanished into points of infinite density. The quantum coral, instead of being destroyed, was using their own energy to erase them from existence. When the last echoes of the implosion faded, an eerie silence fell across the battlefield. Where the mighty swarm fleet had been, only empty space remained, space that still rippled occasionally with the aftershocks of what had occurred. Status report, Kveth demanded, her voice steady despite the strain of the last few moments. Quantum coral is stable, Chen reported. The swarm fleet has been, well, I suppose you could say they've been folded out of our reality. They won't be troubling this or any other dimension again. The coalition ships began running damage assessments while the human fleet started the delicate process of dismantling the quantum coral. The battle was over, but its implications were just beginning to sink in. Admiral Chin, Kveth transmitted privately, your species. You could have defeated the swarm at any time, couldn't you? Why wait? Why let us think you were primitive? There was a long pause before Chin responded. Because war isn't just about winning battles, Admiral. It's about forging alliances, building trust. We didn't want to just defeat the swarm. We wanted to prove that humanity could be a valuable part of the galactic community. Kveth's crystalline form shimmered with understanding. The humans hadn't just demonstrated their military might, they had shown wisdom in how they used it. They had turned a potential catastrophe into an opportunity for cooperation and mutual respect. As the combined fleet began the long process of securing the sector, Kveth couldn't help but wonder what other surprises humanity had in store for the galaxy. They had arrived late to the galactic stage, but their entrance had been nothing short of revolutionary. The stars seemed a little brighter now, the void a little less empty. The age of humanity had begun, and the universe would never be quite the same.